Hello, Georgetown. I'm Beverly Enos, and this is Spotlight Georgetown. This is our local cable TV show. You can find us on the weekends, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. If you'd like to be part of the show, please let us know. I'm always looking for interesting people and interesting characters or something different that's going on to come and be interviewed. So if you have something that you would like to share with the town, let me know, and we'll make sure you come in the hot seat. If you'd like to learn how to run the cameras or help with some of the production, we have some really neat gadgets in here, and you might have some fun. So hope you'll join us soon. This week we're going to be talking to ChandlerNoyes. Now Chandler's been in town since, we're talking Ice Age here, which is we'll talk about later, but he's also been involved in some other things, which we're going to talk about first. Welcome.
Welcome, great thing to be here.
It's nice to have you here. Now, I don't think people realize, because most of us see you now at what you do in town, but before you were retired, what did you do with the airlines? You worked with the airlines in some manner.
I did. I was in the sales department for 10 years, 2 different airlines, actually.
Based where?
I was based in New York City and Boston, principally.
Okay, so were the people in Boston more adventurous or people in New York more adventurous?
Oh, I would say definitely the New York people were more adventurous. No question about that.
Now, time frame that you were doing this?
This was in the 60s to 70s.
Oh, wow. That's when people traveled and it was very exciting and romantic, and they would pack for 3 weeks
All
and
of
trunks
that.
and
Oh,
boxes
yes.
and
Oh,
hat
yes.
boxes.
Yes.
Okay. One of the first times that I flew, and I flew to Japan, they actually woke you up in the middle of the night to have a ceremony when you crossed the date line.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the types of things going on. Did things like that happen where you were?
Well, it happened to me, but it wasn't in the middle of the night. It was when I crossed over the Arctic Circle.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting place to go to.
Oh, yes.
Now, what was your most interesting episode or your interesting place or person while you were doing the airline work?
The most well, it's very difficult to narrow that down to one most interesting person, but I would say that the very first person I had any dealings with at least with the first airline, on the ticket counter, was on a Thanksgiving weekend, which is notoriously one of the busiest,
Yeah.
and it was also one with awful weather, cancellations, delays, and my first customer had an international ticket, which in those days you had to recalculate and figure it out and then print it out a new one. We didn't have computers in those days. And since it was the first one and he wouldn't stop talking, I said, I've got to control this a little better. So I told him that if he didn't go over and sit down on the bench and shut up, I wasn't going to do it. He did what I asked him to do. I did my work, brought him back over. He was satisfied, and he left. My supervisor at the time said, do you realize you've just told our #1 commuter to shut up and sit down? And I said, the miserable person made me nervous, and so that's what he did. But the bottom line was, he was a New York Garments District Jew, and he dealt with people and respected them when they dealt like that. So he was a very nice man. He came back and took us all out to dinner many times at the famous restaurants, and he also asked me to do all of his ticketing. So
Okay.
regardless of what I did right or wrong, he appreciated it.
Now, ticketing must have been really a horrendous experience back then without computers. You couldn't just punch up and say, you know, where are you going? It was actually a book with pages and writing.
Yes,
And, okay.
many pages.
Okay.
We were on the threshold of computers. We had a thing called a dressograph, and we could put a little plate in the machine and it would tell us the availability of flights. But
Wow.
that was very archaic by comparison today.
I mean, I was flying back in those times, and it never even dawned on me that you just couldn't, you know, I mean, now people can go on the internet and find their own flights and don't even need to use a travel agent or ticket agents.
This is very true, but that wasn't true in the 60s.
Yeah.
But it was more glamorous to fly, as you said, back then.
So what was your most interesting place? You've told us your most interesting person. How about the most interesting place?
Well, there were several. For various reasons, I enjoyed Cairo, Egypt, very much.
Wow.
I also fell in love with Australia.
So you got to do a lot of traveling at the same time.
Quite a bit, quite a bit.
Because you worked for the airline.
Mm-hmm. It did help.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Cairo. pyramids. I've been there, and
It's fascinating.
it's fascinating. You learn about it in school from the time you were a little
I
kid.
didn't think when I was there that the three classes of citizenry that they talked about even existed. It was rich and poor.
It's
And
still very much the same.
And camels are the same no matter where you are. They don't like most Americans anyway. At least they didn't like me.
And they're uncomfortable to ride.
It refreshed my memory to a point when I was 7 years old and decided I didn't like horseback riding. And I said, 20 years later, I'm on a camel. I said, go think.
Yeah, yeah. It's always nice to do some traveling. Now, we talked jokingly about the rumors that you've been here since the Ice Age. You actually went to school in the building that we are taping this show.
This is true.
And it was, what was the school name at that time?
Central School.
It was Central School. And what grades were you in here?
I was just here basically in the 7th.
Okay. So what grades did the building go to?
It went, actually, I think it went to the 8th, but then by the time I came around, the 8th grade was in the Purley High School.
Okay.
Which is now elementary, I guess.
Which is now elementary, which is now kindergarten and first or something
Whatever.
like that. Yeah, yeah. They change it around quite often. If you were to recommend someone to travel now, where would you tell them to go? Where would you tell people to travel in this day and age?
Well, there's a lot of different places. What I learned through my experience was that if you are going overseas, you should go to Paris first because you're bright, fresh as a daisy, and you can appreciate it much better rather than going at the end of a trip when you're tired. It's a demanding city, but gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from going there for a weekend back in January in the early 60s, and we were guests of Air France. There were 49 of us from around the country, and the total cost was $49. That was the airfare, the hotel, the meals, whatever.
$49.
That's it. That was, we left Friday morning from JFK and arrived about midnight in Paris in time to go to the late show at the Lido Cafe, which was then as good as it ever is. And with complimentary champagne and all this stuff. And then we kept on going. We never went to bed.
Fam trips are wonderful, aren't they?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. We went to an all-night jour et nuit, all-night cafe. We had French onion soup and then a thing called tournedo au rossini, which is filet with truffles.
Ooh.
It was delicious.
Ooh.
And we had some interesting experiences along the way in Paris.
How many other of these wonderful cities did you get to visit?
I went to London frequently, and I went to Hawaii frequently. And then one day I decided I would like to go to Australia. So I went over to the sales office and asked them if I could get a trip. No problem. What I didn't realize at the time was that they gave me a round-trip first-class jet ticket.
Oh, wow.
Which was quite extraordinary.
Now, how long did it take to get to Australia then?
Well, this was on Qantas, their national airline, and we were part of the round-the-world service. And we boarded in New York, and it was 5 hours and 45 minutes to San Francisco.
It's not that much different now.
No, and an hour wait while they refueled and whatever they had to do. And then it was a 4-hour flight to Honolulu.
Okay, not that much different than now.
But what I was going to say is that out of New York we had a 7-course meal with champagne and wines and everything, and the same out of San Francisco for first-class passengers. It was a champagne lobster supper because it was getting close to 9 or 10 o'clock. And then with an hour wait in Honolulu, we junketed off for Nandi in the South Pacific. And we stopped there for about an hour. There wasn't any food service in and out of there because it really was the middle of the night. And then they woke us up about 6 o'clock to have breakfast before landing in Sydney.
Okay.
And at that time I did get to go up into the cockpit and see the coastline of Australia, which I thought was fascinating. You couldn't do that today if your life depended upon it.
No, industry has changed.
Quite a bit. But we had boarding the flight probably in Nandi, the chairman of the board for Qantas, and he had been to Singapore. And he bought one of those automobile horns, go, wah, wah, you know, and he kept blowing this thing all night long, somewhere in the plane.
Don't you love it? Now, you've been involved in other businesses as well, not just the airline business. What else have you done in your life? This is going to be an interesting comment here.
Well, I've taught school,
Really, what grades?
K through 8, music.
Local? Okay, you're a music teacher.
Yeah. And I did this in Newburyport at Immaculate Conception.
Okay.
It was also a private school. And that was an interesting period in my life. I've also worked in the funeral business,
Really?
and I managed 2 movie theaters on the side.
Okay. I seem to remember seeing you at a movie theater one time.
Possibly.
Yep, up in Newburyport.
Yeah, Salisbury.
Salisbury. Yep. Okay.
So those are all good times. And I was trying to think, there's something else that I have done, but it
I
escapes
think
me.
what most of us in Georgetown know you for is your music. For years you lived out on
East Main.
and there was always a sign because you taught music and you taught piano and
Organ.
Okay.
It was an interesting time also, and at the time I had a sign made, and when I put it up, the zoning people said that it was too big.
12 inches by 12 inches is all that's allowed.
Well, this was a sheet of plywood.
I know, I remember.
Well, and then in the meantime, somebody came along and threw a rock through the garage window, so I used it to cover up the window. Nobody ever said anything. It was there for the rest of my life.
Yeah. You were there teaching a long time.
Yes.
What's your connection with music now?
Well, currently I'm music director and organist at St. Mary's Church here in town.
Okay.
And I'm on the number 5 year of a rebuilding program. I was hired to take over from a predecessor who had been there a long time, and it's taken about 5 years to get to the point where I want to be. And the people I work with are very nice, and the choirs are most cooperative, and they have to put up with my temperament sometimes.
Now, you have put together such a strong program there, if I may tell a little story. A year ago, Christmas Eve, you were taken ill, and you were in the hospital, and that program went on.
I know. It was really...
It
wasn't comical, except that when I called Father Carroll, I said, you know where I am? He said, no. I said, I'm in the hospital. And prior to that, I had said that I've got a big service to play for, and they said, you're not going anywhere. And I said, why? Because you've got too many drugs in your system. Oh, boy. Anyway, his reply was, that's God's way of saying Merry Christmas. But I had trained them well, and they did take over and did a great job.
You did. It was a wonderful program. And that's when you know that you have really done a great job.
It's happened more than once, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, plans for the future. What do you think you're going to be doing next? You seem to have done all kinds of things and are always evolving into something else.
Well, I've always been involved with horticulture, gardening, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So that's ongoing.
You were involved with the Trestle Way project for the greenhouse. Can you tell us about that?
Well, that's a project that has been reoccurring every few years because there are, unfortunately, people in this town or any other town who think that whatever people do for other people's enjoyment shouldn't be done, unfortunately.
Okay.
And they sometimes go out of their way to try and make it difficult.
All right. Now, there's a greenhouse there, and you
It's
were
been there
involved with the fundraising project.
Twice.
Twice. Okay.
3 years ago, we found that we needed a new furnace, so we raised the money for that. And in the meantime, they were going to close the greenhouse down, this group, and it didn't happen. And now, last fall, the same thing occurred, and we showed that we could raise money, and with the help of the townspeople and lots of friends over there, and so it's still open.
I know that Judy Bartnicki made some
She
donations.
made lots of donations on her paintings, and it was and other people made donations so we could raffle them off, and it was very successful, I might add.
Good. So that's something in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So we never know where we're going to see you next.
This is true.
And we have always enjoyed your music.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you very much for coming and joining us.
Thank you.
It was great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is Beverly Enos, and this is Spotlight Georgetown. I hope you'll join us Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Thanks for joining us today. Bye for now.